Season 4 is something of a what-if season. In the fall of 2007, the Writers Guild of America went on strike, which stopped the production of virtually all scripted programming within the United States, and that included Lost, as the show's writers were among those who picketed and held up signs. The strike lasted 100 days, and as a result, the fourth season of Lost wound up being just 14 episodes long. For context, the first 3 seasons all ran at least 23 episodes. Over the years, many have wondered if the writer's strike was actually what ruined the show, and for what it's worth, the show was appreciably worse after season 4. However, the writer's strike had less of an impact than you might think. As part of their 3-year-out agreement with ABC, Lost was only supposed to produce 16 episodes in the 2007-2008 season anyway, so it really only lost 2 episodes, and those episodes were simply added on to seasons 5 and 6 respectively. To be perfectly honest, I think the strike may have actually been a blessing in disguise, because season 4 is great. Well, mostly. Season 4 is infinitely better than Season 3, and I think part of the reason why is that the strike forced the writers to hurry the fuck up. They no longer had the luxury to stall. They couldn't afford to have the characters dicking around, having breakfast by the ocean and playing ping pong and flying doves. The strike forced them to cut out the fat, and that's exactly what this show needed after a blubbery Season 3. And sure, maybe Season 4 wasn't as smoothly paced out as the other seasons, but really, if Season 4 was 90 minutes longer, all that would have done is give the writers more time to stick in pointless mysteries. There'd have been like a clown in the middle of the forest. Like a character would just be walking one day, and then they'd turn, and there'd be a clown just standing there, and we'd never get a resolution for it. And there'd be all these theories about the clown. Like on Lostpedia, there'd be theories that the smoke monster was the clown and was trying to deliver a message, and then someone else would write a theory that Walt was the clown, but he was wearing makeup so no one could see him, and then yet another person would note that if you look at the top of the clown's horn, it's pointed at a 305-degree angle, which matches the frequency needed to leave the island, and then someone else would talk about how there's religious symbolism to clowns, and how clowns are very important to the Egyptians and to Freemasons. By the way, this is a metaphor. I'm not actually suggesting that there'd be a clown on the island. But people really did analyze the angle that an arrow was pointed at on the painting inside the hatch. People took this show very seriously.
The coolest thing is to see that people are not just thinking about it, but are, really smart about it and coming to these very interesting, often very complex conclusions about what may or may not be happening there.
Season 4 does have its fair share of unanswered mysteries, like what's up with this random other that suddenly appears? Who is the RG on Naomi's bracelet? What's up with these quote-unquote rules?
He changed the rules. What? Who? What rules?
Why does this cabin move throughout the forest? Who has been referring to when he said a different leader of the others had ordered the purge? Why was Desmond Faraday's constant? Why did Charles Widmore's agent want Locke to go on a walkabout before Locke had even been to the island? How did Locke draw this picture of the smoke monster as a kid when he not only hadn't been to the island, but was deemed by Richard not to be special? And you get the point. It's almost easier to list the things in the show that aren't totally bewildering. Honestly, though, this season moves so fast, with like 1 or 2 exceptions, that you kind of start to believe that the show knows where it's going again. It turns out that while some of the people on the freighter, mainly Lapidus, Miles, Charlotte, and Faraday, are good guys, the freighter was actually sent there with soldiers who have orders to capture Ben Linus and then kill everyone on the island.
We can't turn him over.
And why the hell not?
Because once they have me, their orders are to kill everyone else on the island.
I have you in my custody, and I promise you that no one else in that house will be harmed.
You and I both know that once you have me, there's nothing to stop you from killing everybody else on this island.
What kind of guy do you think I am?
Oh, and they're gonna burn down the island too, apparently.
And if Linus knows that we're gonna torch the island, there's only one place that he can go.
What do you mean, torch the island?
Man, the island sure was in danger in Season 4. The island really should have had a protector for times like this. Some guy whose role was specifically to protect the island. Boy, what if it turned out that the island did have a protector, but he didn't do anything to stop the freighter people from killing everyone? What if it turned out that he didn't lift a single finger to prevent these innocent bystanders from getting mowed down? Boy, that protector would have to be a complete asshole. Anyway, the mastermind of the freighter attack is Charles Widmore, who's a lot like the others in the Dharma Initiative in that we basically have no idea why he does the things he does. We know from flashbacks over the previous seasons that he hates Desmond, who's in love with his daughter Penny, and we know that he's fighting with Ben, and that there are apparently some rules to them fighting.
Have you come here to kill me, Benjamin?
We both know I can't do that.
But we never find out what the goal of the freighter assault was. Like, at one point, Widmore tells Ben,
"That island's mine, Benjamin. It always was. It will be again."
but if his men had succeeded in torching the island, how would the island have been of any use to him? What was the point of all this? I mean, it's one thing for a bracelet or a drawing to be ambiguous in a mystery show, but we should at least be able to figure out the character's motivations. Charles Widmore spent billions of dollars putting a fake plane in the ocean, and he told the media that it contained the passengers of Oceanic Flight 815. He has a dossier on every one of the survivors, and he wants them all to be killed.
If Widmore finds the island, it's good night for everybody on it.
And why? What was the masterstroke of all this? This is one of the rare instances where a cliched villainous monologue would have actually been really helpful. Because seriously, what was his plan here? What's nice about Season 4, though, is that the show doesn't dwell on the specifics of Widmore, and instead passes the main villain baton over to Martin Keamy, the mercenary who's leading the attack on the island. Keamy is just plain evil. On a show dominated by ambiguous mystery men, whose every other action is a contradiction, Keamy is only on screen to punch and kill people. He's very clearly a danger to everyone and everything, and that gives his screen time an oomph that just wasn't there with the others. Keamy's not on some dainty mission to nab pregnant women. He's there to slaughter civilians!
I need you to tell me exactly how many people are on that island, where every single one of them is.
Keamy's presence also helped obscure the not very subtle rebooting of the others that started occurring right at the end of Season 3. We're now suddenly supposed to believe that the others have a grand purpose, and that they really are the good guys that Ben said they were at the end of Season 2.
We're the good guys, Michael.
But in the previous seasons, the others were doing things like brainwashing people, and stealing kids, and committing murder, and it was all for the sake of fetuses. The ulterior motive of having the freighter mercenaries be so evil was that it made the others look quaint in comparison. It made characters like Ben sympathetic, and that allowed just enough breathing room for the writers to tap dance away from the whole abducting pregnant women thing, which is never again an issue after Season 3.
I'm not pregnant.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm sure.
I mean, woo!
Would it have been the worst thing in the world?
Actually, Kate, you and the baby would both die if you were pregnant, so that kind of would be the worst thing in the world. Did you, forget that? I guess it's convenient for the show that you don't care, but I think Juliet made it pretty clear to you that pregnancy was kind of a killer on the island.
What happens to pregnant women on this island?
They all die.
In real time, it's only been a few days since she told you that too, so I'm not sure how you forgot. But yeah, congrats on not dying. The other thing I like about Season 4 is that the show begins to phase out the flashbacks, and instead gives us flash forwards into what the characters were doing after they got off the island. Unlike the flashbacks in Season 3, which were predominantly skippable, the flash forwards were interesting because they were pieces to a puzzle. At first, we don't know how Jack and the others got off the island, how many people are off the island, or even who's dead or how they died, but we gradually learn everything the closer we get to the season finale. The flash forwards worked because they necessitated the producers to actually map out what they were going to do at the beginning of the season. That what happened at the start of the flash forwards mattered at the end of them, and that they eventually synced with what was happening in the present time, that's what made this satisfying. And by the way, that's precisely why the Flash Sideways in Season 6 are completely unsatisfying, because absolutely nothing matters in them. For the most part, I love Season 4, at least when it veers away from the god-awful love triangle between Jack, Kate, and Juliet.
And Ben's gonna win, Jack. And he knows how I feel about you.
Blech! I love that tense, important things happen in this season long before the finale, and I appreciated just about all of the new characters, and I love that an element of horror was sprinkled onto the show again, which hadn't been there for quite a while. When you see Carl and Russo's cold, dead heads sticking out of the ground, you know how serious the stakes are. However, there are some troubling precedents that Season 4 establishes when it comes to pseudo-science. Suddenly, the island is no longer just an island. It now has a barrier or a force field or something that prevents people from leaving or entering it. There's one and only one way to leave and enter the island conventionally, and that's to approach it from a compass bearing of 305 degrees.
Stay on a heading of exactly 305. Faraday says that's the only safe way to and from the boat.
What's weird here is that in Season 2, when Ben told Michael that he could leave the island, he gave him a totally different bearing to follow.
Do you know how to drive a boat?
Yeah, I can drive a boat.
Good. Then you're going to take this boat, and follow a compass bearing of 325. And if you do that exactly, you and your son will find rescue.
But in Season 4, Faraday is really persistent that the 305 bearing is the only way in or out.
Just be sure that you follow the same exact bearing that we came in on, okay? No matter what. By that I mean no matter what, just stay on it.
Exactly doesn't leave a hell of a lot of wiggle room, so what's with the discrepancy? You might think that when the hatch exploded and caused the sky to turn purple, that might have changed the bearing somehow, except that Michael left the island after that happened. And you might think that the bearing changes every time someone leaves the island, except it remains a 305 bearing before and after Lapidus leaves the island in the helicopter. So, maybe the others had a boat in the water that intercepted Michael's boat, and then that boat carried them through the 305 bearing, because Ben did say that they would find rescue. But then why wouldn't Ben just put him on that boat instead of giving Michael his own boat? Plus, Ben's a pretty straightforward guy when he wants things done. He doesn't strike me as the kind of person who'd devote that many resources just to get one dude and his kid off the island.
So?
Well, anyway, the bearing is 305 now, and it's made abundantly clear that you're going to suffer a horrible fate if you try to enter the island via a different bearing. Some of the people on the freighter are losing their minds just from being near the island's barrier, with one person even tying chains around themselves and committing suicide from the madness it brought on.
I think it's got something to do with the close proximity of the island.
There's also a time dilation difference between the island and the boat, where what happens on the island happens at a different rate than everywhere else in the world, although, for whatever reason, the dudes on the freighter can still communicate with the people on the island via a satellite phone with no time dilation whatsoever, which doesn't make any sense to me, but make of it what you will. Honestly, though, if I have any grievance with Season 4, it's that the show didn't end right here. I doubt I'm gonna get much pushback when I say that Lost should not have lasted 121 episodes. Hell, even the producers once said that they thought 100 would be the limit. The climax of the show should have been them getting off the island. That's what every episode until now had been building up to. That's what had brought all of these different characters together in the first place. I really do believe that had they scrubbed away some of the unsolved mysteries, sawed off some of the loose threads they were establishing, and removed some rather questionable scenes entirely, the writers could have reworked the Season 4 finale into a rich and satisfying series finale. At the end of the season, Jack and some of the others get in a helicopter, but when they get back to the freighter, a bomb goes off, which blows up the boat and presumably kills Jin, and that forces them to crash land in the ocean, where they're later rescued by Penelope Widmore, Desmond's girlfriend. And now, here's how I, retroactively, would have ended both this episode and the series. Okay, so we know that Hurley is a multi-millionaire because he played the numbers to win the lottery once upon a time. He has over $150 million to his name, and Sun is also pretty damn rich. I'd have had them use their vast wealth to send boats to the island and gradually rescue everyone, although everyone involved is advised to never speak about where they were or what they'd seen. And as we get a time-lapse montage of people being rescued, we see Jack and Kate and some of the others getting used to life on terra firma, being reunited with their loved ones. We see people attending funerals too, so that we recognize it was a stoic victory. Meanwhile, some people come to terms with their situation and decide to stay on the island, like Bernard and Rose and the rest of the others. They could all stay on the island, and Locke would definitely stay on the island, and then we'd get one shot of Ben off the island in Widmore's room before the camera would instantly cut to black to insinuate that Ben was going to kill him.
Wake up, Charles.
You know, tie up that loose thread, blah blah blah. And on the last boat trip ferrying people back to the mainland, Daniel Faraday would pop up and say that the time dilation between the island and the rest of the world was growing farther and farther apart. He'd tell Jack that in a few weeks, the island's time dilation will become so unstable that it will become impossible to even find the island, let alone to enter it through the correct bearing. And after ushering people onto the last boat, Jack has one last conversation with Locke, with Jack knowing that he's never going to see him or this island ever again, and they'd have a final heart-to-heart talk about what this was all for, if everything they had done was worth it, about what the island meant, and so on. Locke would insist it was worth it, Jack would ask what the point of it all was, you know, science and belief. And then, as the ferry sails away from the island forever, as Jack takes a last fleeting glance at the place he had been living on for 108 days, a glance that's interspersed with some nice shots of characters looking out at the water, at last being at peace, the Michael Giacchino score would wind down, and Jack would think about either Juliet or Kate, whichever woman he fell in love with on the island, whichever of them would be waiting for him back home, and a selfish thought would pop into his head that maybe, just maybe, it was worth it. And the show ends, and that'd be it. Unfortunately, that's not what happened at all. Unfortunately, such an ending was never even possible, because we knew from Jack's scream at the end of Season 3 that they would all eventually have to go back to the island. Season 4 exists to tell us how and why the survivors are off the island, not to resolve conflicts. Season 4 is a catch-up season, not a wrap-up season. And it's a shame, because this scene could have been avoided.
He wants us to move the island.
In the season finale, it turns out that the Dharma Initiative built a station called the Orchid that's dedicated to researching time travel, because why not? Ben Linus breaks a hole in the Orchid structure, and in that hole is a frozen donkey wheel behind a wall of glowy light.
I hope you're happy now, Jacob.
Ben turns the donkey wheel, the light gets brighter, and then the island disappears because he moved it. In the season finale, Ben actually moves the island to a new place in time.
Where's the island? Where's the island?
This is it, folks. As far as I'm concerned, this was the moment when Lost officially jumped the shark, and we may not have even known it at the time. People may have watched this and assumed, like with every other mystery, that it would eventually be addressed in such a way that it'd make total sense. But to a lot of people, this was the first real sign that the show was veering towards disaster. And you know what? Those people were 100% right, because moving the island laid the groundwork for every insane event that took place in the final season. Let me explain why this was so bad, in case you're baffled at where I'm coming from. See, the thing with Lost is that the viewers weren't just promised answers, they were promised reasonable answers. In the beginning, Lost sold people on the idea that everything in the show had a scientific explanation. In a 2005 interview by ABC's 2020, it was noted that the producers, quote, say there is a logical explanation for everything. That view was even expanded on in a New York Times article from the same year, where the producers claimed that they wanted to adhere to a science fact model, as seen in Michael Crichton novels, as opposed to science fiction. Lindelof stated, there can be things that are happening that are, quote, phenomenal, but there's always a scientific answer to it. And as an example, it was noted that when Jack saw his dead father in the woods in Season 1, he also happened to be dehydrated at the time and could have been hallucinating.
The audience is intelligent, they are very savvy, and you can't talk down to them.
Now, because of those promises, fans were willing to accept a lot of the seemingly impossible events that happened in this show at face value, because again, they had been told that it would all make sense. But over time, Lost kept pushing the envelope on what could be considered logical, and over time it became harder and harder for fans to explain away what was happening each week. When it turned out that there was a man living inside the hatch in the middle of the woods, fans were like, hey, I'm invested at this point, I'll go with it. There's a monster made of smoke, I'll go with it. The crash survivors are still somehow beautiful, even though they haven't shaved or bathed or brushed their teeth in weeks, and they should all be like horribly disgusting. Whatever, it's a fucking TV show, I'll give it certain artistic liberties. There's a black horse on the island? Well, that's kind of weird, but I'll go with it. Ben Linus kidnapped Jack so he could operate on his back when he easily could have just asked Jack to do it from the beginning, like a normal person? Okay, that's really stupid, but whatever, I'll go with it. Desmond's vision about Claire getting in a helicopter was completely wrong, even though every one of his visions were 100% accurate before that, I'll go with it. Mikhail was somehow able to swim underwater and pull a grenade, even though he had been harpooned in the chest by Desmond, I'll go with it. Charlie closed the door on himself and sacrificed himself when Mikhail pulled this grenade, even though Charlie had all the time in the world to escape from drowning. Like, seriously, look at all the time he had. He easily could have closed the door behind him and just left, and not died. And plus, he already knew that Desmond's vision was bullshit, since it wasn't Penny's boat that was coming for them. So there was seriously no reason why he had to do this, but whatever, he wanted to be heroic, I'll go with it. After having a knife lodged in her back, and after Jack the doctor inspects her and leaves her for dead, Naomi is somehow able to wander into the forest without anyone noticing her, climb a tree and assault Kate before then bleeding out and dying? I'll go with it. Locke put a live grenade in Miles' mouth and then left Miles alone, and then Miles kept it in his mouth for days or something because the show never went back to it? I'll tentatively go with it. But this was the breaking point. This was Lost telling its audience that its aspirations of being a science fact show were gone, because it's impossible to logically explain this. This was a magic wheel activating magic light that magically moved Magic Island, and at the end of the day, this could never be anything other than that.
Locke. He moved the island.
No, he didn't.
Oh, really? You got another explanation, man. I'd love to hear it.
The moment that magic seeped into the construct of the show was the moment that Lost stopped being Lost. The show that you'll see scenes from in parts 5 and 6 is a very, very different show than it was when it was first on the air. What was once a show that encouraged thought and theories and invited people to be smart and analytical, now demanded its viewers to turn off their brains and blindly accept whatever crazy bullshit it was throwing at the screen. Bullshit that would progressively get crazier and crazier and crazier as the series went on. And it's a shame, because Lost didn't need to go down that road. Lost could have and should have ended right here.
But the network was obviously looking at it as the show is still a hit. Everybody's watching it. It's unheard of to announce an end date for a show this far in advance. So, you know, we basically said, you don't understand. It's our job to look forwards because we know exactly where we're going and how much story we have. But once we reach the point where we can no longer continue to work towards something and we're just working, you're going to see it.